There's a house, forgotten by time, hidden deep in the woods, a place that no one dares to speak of. The locals call it the Whispering House, but no one really knows why. When Emily received an old letter, the familiar handwriting of her late grandmother, inviting her to visit this very house, she couldn't resist. She thought she was just returning to a piece of her childhood, a house that once held the warmth of family gatherings and memories she had long buried. But what awaited her was far from the home she remembered. As Emily arrived, the house stood eerily silent, its once vibrant walls now cracked and faded by years of neglect. The air was thick with a strange heaviness, and the wind seemed to hum through the broken windows. The closer she got, the more the sense of unease grew, like something, or someone, was waiting for her. She stepped through the door, her heart racing, feeling the weight of a presence she couldn't quite place. Inside, the house felt like it was alive, the floorboards creaking underfoot as if they were whispering secrets long kept hidden. She wandered deeper into the rooms, and the whispers began. Faint at first, but growing louder, echoing through the walls. It was as if the house itself was trying to communicate with her, pulling her toward something she wasn't ready to find. But the true horror lay upstairs, in the attic, where the most chilling discovery awaited her. What was the house hiding, and why had her grandmother left her this invitation? Emily's curiosity would lead her to a truth more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. As Emily made her way through the house, the whispers seemed to grow louder, but they were not just voices. There was something else in them, a sense of urgency, as if the walls themselves were pleading with her to stop. She shook it off, convincing herself that the house was simply filled with the echoes of memories, some old creaks of the building settling. After all, she hadn't been here since she was a little girl. Back then, the house was alive with laughter and the smell of her grandmother's cooking, a place of comfort. But now, the house felt like a stranger, a cold shell of what it once was. Emily's mind raced as she walked deeper into the heart of the house. The floorboards groaned under her weight, each step making her more uneasy. It was as if the house was keeping secrets, and the more she explored, the more she felt its secrets pressing in on her. She reached the living room, where the dusty furniture stood, untouched for years. Her grandmother's favorite chair, once positioned by the window, was now facing the wall, its fabric worn and faded. A strange chill filled the air, and for a brief moment, Emily could have sworn she saw a shadow pass behind her, moving in the corner of her eye. She quickly turned around, but there was nothing there, just the dimly lit room, the silence, and the growing whispers that seemed to reverberate through the walls. It was then that Emily noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the mantelpiece, there was a photo frame. She picked it up and gasped. It was a picture of her grandmother, but it was old, much older than the last photo Emily had seen of her. In the photo, her grandmother was standing in front of the house, but her expression was unsettling. Her eyes were wide and filled with fear, her lips slightly parted as if she had tried to say something. The photo seemed to pulse with an energy that made Emily's skin crawl. Her heart raced as she turned the photo over, revealing a message written on the back in a hurried hand. "Don't go up to the attic. It's not what you think." Emily froze. The words felt like a warning, but from who? And what was her grandmother trying to protect her from? Before she could process the message, a loud thud came from upstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Her breath caught in her throat. Who else was here? The house had been abandoned for years. There was no one else. Yet the sound of movement above her was undeniable. The whispers intensified, growing louder, almost frantic, urging her to turn back. But Emily couldn't. Not now. Something deep inside her pushed her forward, and she started to climb the staircase, her hand gripping the railing tightly as her feet moved slowly, one step at a time. The air grew colder as she ascended, and with each step, the whispers seemed to grow more desperate. Her pulse quickened, and her thoughts raced. What could be up there in the attic? Why was her grandmother so afraid? The door to the attic loomed ahead, cracked slightly open, as if waiting for her. She reached for the handle, and in that moment, everything seemed to stop. The house fell silent, the whispers gone, and only the sound of her breathing filled the space. She hesitated for a second, but then, with a deep breath, she pushed the door open. What awaited her on the other side was something she could never have prepared for. The attic door creaked as Emily pushed it open, and a wave of musty, stale air rushed past her, sending a chill down her spine. The dim light from the hallway barely reached inside, leaving the attic shrouded in darkness. Emily's heartbeat thundered in her chest, the whispers that had haunted her every step now replaced by an eerie silence. She stood there for a moment, gathering the courage to step inside, but something kept her frozen in place. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. "Don't go up to the attic. It's not what you think." Despite the warning, her curiosity got the better of her. She stepped into the attic, her feet crunching on the old wooden floorboards beneath her. The air was thick with dust, and the space smelled of decay and forgotten memories. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, and old trunks and boxes were scattered around the room. Some of the boxes had been opened, their contents spilling out like abandoned remnants of another time. Emily walked slowly, her fingers brushing against the surfaces of old furniture, feeling the cold, unwelcoming touch of the forgotten past. As she ventured deeper into the attic, she noticed something that immediately caught her eye: a large, old mirror propped against the far wall. Its surface was cracked, but still reflected faint images, distorted like something from a dream. There was something unsettling about it, as though it had been waiting for her. Drawn to it, Emily approached cautiously, her breath caught in her throat. The whispers returned, softer now, almost as if they were speaking through the mirror itself. She reached out and touched the cool, cracked glass. The moment her fingers made contact, a strange sensation rippled through her, a sharp, cold shock running through her hand and up her arm. Her vision blurred for a second, and then, as if the mirror had swallowed her into its depths, the room around her seemed to warp and twist. Shadows flickered and shifted, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. The walls felt as though they were closing in on her, and Emily could barely breathe. Then, as quickly as it started, everything stopped. The whispers faded, the shadows retreated, and the room was once again still. But something had changed. The mirror had left its mark on her. Emily could feel it. She turned around, trying to steady her breath, but when she looked back, the attic no longer looked the same. The boxes, the old furniture, it all seemed darker, more oppressive. Something was wrong. The house was changing before her eyes, warping in ways she couldn't explain. She turned toward the door, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere, but as she reached for the handle, she froze. There, standing at the top of the stairs, was a figure, a shadowed figure, too still to be human, yet unmistakably there. Emily's heart stopped as the figure stepped forward, and she could make out the faintest trace of a smile on its face, one that did not belong to anyone she had ever known. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind, the fear in her eyes, the cryptic warning. Emily had crossed into something far darker than she could have ever imagined. But before she could move, the figure spoke, its voice like the whispers of the house, familiar and yet not. "You shouldn't have come here," it said softly. "Now you'll never leave." The words sank deep into her chest like a heavy weight, and with them, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The attic door slammed shut behind her. Emily's breath hitched as the figure at the top of the stairs moved closer, each step reverberating in the eerie silence of the attic. The door slammed shut behind her with a force that made her flinch. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, strangled by the oppressive air that had suddenly thickened around her. The figure, its face still obscured, advanced slowly, with deliberate, almost predatory steps. Her heart raced in her chest, and she instinctively backed away, pressing her back against the cold, damp wall. The mirror in the corner seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the cracks in its surface spreading ever so slightly, as if it, too, were part of the growing menace in the room. Emily's mind scrambled for an explanation, for a way out. She had to think. There had to be something, anything, she could do. The figure stopped just a few feet away, its head tilted as if it were studying her, analyzing every move, every breath. She could feel its presence, a suffocating weight that made it hard to breathe, as though the very air was being stolen from her. Its voice, when it spoke again, was low, almost a whisper, but it carried with it a cold, bone-chilling authority. "You shouldn't have come up here," it said, its words twisting in the air like smoke. "This house, it doesn't let go. Once you cross the threshold, it owns you, and now you belong to it." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Her hands were shaking, her body frozen in fear. The attic felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in around her, the shadows stretching longer, darker. She looked at the door, but the handle seemed miles away, impossible to reach. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that whatever this was, whatever was happening to her, it wasn't just the house. It was something far more malevolent, something ancient. The figure stepped closer, so close now that Emily could feel its cold presence pressing against her skin, the air around her vibrating with something unnatural. It raised its hand, and as it did, the room seemed to warp again, the furniture blurring in and out of focus, as if the very fabric of reality was being unraveled. Emily's thoughts scattered, replaced by a deep, primal terror that made her knees weaken beneath her. She tried to speak, to ask what it wanted, but her voice was swallowed by the weight of the silence. And then, just when she thought she couldn't take it any longer, the figure did something she hadn't expected. It reached out, its long, spindly fingers brushing the side of her face in a chilling caress. She gasped, but before she could pull away, the figure's eyes, now visible, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light, locked onto hers. In that instant, Emily felt a surge of memories flood her mind, memories that weren't hers. Flashbacks of the house's past, of voices calling out, of endless nights spent in darkness, of people, like her, trapped in its twisted grip. She saw herself, or rather, someone like her, running through the house, desperately trying to escape. The faces of the lost, the forgotten, all had the same terrified expression, and one by one, they were claimed by the house, their fates sealed. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her vision spinning as the weight of the revelation hit her. "Don't you see?" the figure whispered. "You were always meant to be here." It was then that Emily realized the terrifying truth. The house had been waiting for her. She wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. The house had a history, a dark, twisted past that claimed the souls of anyone who dared to enter. And now it was her turn. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to focus. She had to fight. She had to find a way out before she became another ghost in the attic, another forgotten soul trapped forever. But with every passing second, the walls seemed to close in tighter, the shadows growing longer and more suffocating. And then, just as the figure began to move toward her again, there was a loud bang, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. Emily turned, her heart leaping in her chest. The mirror, the cracks in the glass had spread even further, and now the reflection inside wasn't just of the room, it was something else entirely, something alive. The figure paused, its attention momentarily diverted by the shifting image in the mirror. Emily seized the opportunity. Her hand darted toward the attic door, but just as her fingers grazed the handle, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The house groaned, as though it were alive, and the temperature dropped, sending a wave of coldness through her body. She twisted the door handle with all her strength, but the door wouldn't budge. Desperation surged through her as she realized she was trapped. The house was closing in, and the figure was coming closer, its eyes locked on hers once again. There was no escape, or so it seemed. But then, as if by some miracle, the mirror seemed to flicker one last time, and in its depths, Emily saw something that made her heart stop. A figure in the reflection, her grandmother standing in the doorway of the attic, watching her with knowing eyes. "Emily," the figure whispered, "you have to break the mirror." The words were like a command, and without thinking, Emily lunged for the mirror, her hand striking the cracked surface with all the force she could muster. The glass shattered in an instant, splintering into countless pieces. The figure let out a terrible, inhuman scream, its form flickering and vanishing into the shards of broken glass. The air around her grew still, and the darkness that had once filled the room seemed to recede, fading into nothingness. But as the last piece of the mirror fell to the floor, Emily felt a new presence, one far more sinister, begin to stir in the shadows. The house, it seemed, was not done with her yet. The stillness of the attic was broken only by the sound of Emily's shallow breaths, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as the last shards of the mirror crashed to the floor. She stood frozen, her heart racing, eyes darting around the room. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to cling to her skin, the air thick with an eerie energy she couldn't shake. For a moment she thought it was over, that the nightmare had finally released its grip on her. But deep down, she knew she was wrong. As the dust settled, she glanced nervously at the broken mirror, expecting nothing but silence. But then, a faint whisper rippled through the room, too soft to catch with the ear, but too clear to ignore. "You've only made it worse," the voice muttered, its tone like cold fingers on her spine. Emily turned toward the sound, her eyes searching for the source, but the room was empty. The walls, once so full of their dark history, now seemed to pulse with an unholy life of their own. The house, or whatever was still controlling it, wasn't finished with her. It had only begun. Suddenly, the floor beneath her feet groaned, a deep, guttural noise that shook the entire attic. Emily staggered back, her hands reaching for anything to steady herself. The boards beneath her feet buckled as if the house itself was preparing to swallow her whole. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her like a swarm of angry voices. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were demands, cries, and pleading calls. Emily clutched her head, her mind spinning with 1,000 different thoughts, each one vying for control. She couldn't make sense of any of it. Her gaze snapped back to the corner of the room where the broken mirror had been. Through the fragments of glass, something was moving. A dark, shifting figure emerged, the reflection warping and distorting like something out of a nightmare. It was her grandmother again, but this time her expression was different. The kindly eyes from before were gone, replaced by a cold, hollow stare. The figure in the reflection raised a hand, not to reach out in comfort, but to gesture toward something behind Emily. Without thinking, she spun around, and that's when she saw it. The door to the attic, which had been sealed tight before, now stood ajar. The faintest glow of light emanated from the crack in the door, a beckoning pulse in the dark. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, to escape, to leave whatever horror was unfolding behind her. But something held her in place, something much stronger than fear. It was the pull of the house, the undeniable sense that this was the point of no return. The whispering grew louder, swirling around her ears, speaking in frantic tones. "You belong to us now," it said, growing more forceful with each passing second. "The house will not let you go. You have opened the door." Emily's pulse raced, her thoughts a jumbled mess. What door? She had broken the mirror. She had thought that would stop it, that it would break the cycle. But clearly, she had been wrong. She had only made things worse. The house was still alive, still hungry, and now its thirst was directed solely at her. The glow from the door grew brighter, and Emily found herself moving toward it, as though her body was no longer her own. She tried to fight it, tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She was powerless. The house was claiming her, drawing her in. Her hand reached out on its own accord, grasping the door handle. The moment she touched it, a shock of cold surged through her body, sending tremors down her spine. She pulled back, gasping for breath, but the pull of the door was too strong. It was like the house was physically dragging her toward it, unwilling to let her escape. With a final desperate cry, Emily swung open the door, her heart pounding as she stepped into the unknown. What lay on the other side was no longer just a part of the house, it was a twisted extension of herself. The walls seemed to bend and shift, reality warping as if the very fabric of time and space was being torn apart, and there, standing before her, was something that made her heart stop. A figure, cloaked in shadow, stood at the far end of the room. Emily's mind screamed, trying to process the image, but it couldn't. It was too much. The figure was not just a presence, it was a mirror of her own reflection, but twisted, distorted into something monstrous. Its eyes were wide, black voids that seemed to stare into the very soul of anyone who met them. Emily could feel her own breath catch in her throat as the figure's hand slowly, deliberately raised toward her. A cold voice, twisted and alien, emerged from the figure's lips, sending a chill through her very bones. "You were always meant to come here," it said, the words like a death knell. "You belong to the house now, just like all the others." Emily tried to scream, to move, but her limbs were frozen. The shadowy figure was drawing closer, and she was powerless to stop it. The air grew thick, and the darkness around her seemed to close in, suffocating her, drowning her in its depths. The house had claimed her, and there was no escape, not anymore. Just as the figure reached for her, the light in the room flickered violently, and then nothing. Everything went black. The darkness around Emily seemed to stretch on forever, suffocating her in its cold embrace. But then, just as quickly as it had consumed her, a sudden crack of light broke through the black void. It wasn't bright, but enough to send a wave of disorienting relief flooding through her. She blinked rapidly, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had the figure touched her? Had the house taken her? She couldn't remember. The light flickered again, and when it steadied, Emily found herself standing in a different place. The attic, the broken mirror, and the glowing door were gone. She was no longer in that oppressive space. Instead, she was standing in an old, forgotten room, an abandoned bedroom that looked like it had been untouched for decades. Dust settled in the corners, and the air was thick with an unsettling stillness. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, its floral pattern nearly indiscernible from age and neglect. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized where she was. This was the room she had seen in her visions, the one she had dreamed of but had never been to in real life. It was the heart of the house, the source of everything. And yet, it felt wrong, out of place. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the room, and Emily turned to find a figure standing in the doorway. It was her grandmother, but something was different. The kindness that had once defined her was now gone, replaced by a cold, vacant stare. Her grandmother's voice came out in a low, haunting whisper, barely audible. "You shouldn't have come here, Emily. You've opened the door to something far worse." Emily's blood ran cold as she stepped back. The words seemed to resonate, deep in her bones, a warning she couldn't ignore. But before she could respond, a second figure appeared beside her grandmother, a shadow, its features too blurry to define. It moved with a menacing intent, creeping toward her like a predator closing in on its prey. Without warning, the shadow lunged at Emily, its presence a suffocating weight. But just as it was about to consume her, the room shifted again. The figure disappeared, leaving Emily standing alone, gasping for air. The cold grip of fear was gone, replaced by a strange calmness. It hit her all at once. She wasn't just battling the house. She was battling herself, the darkest parts of her own mind, her own fears brought to life by the house's curse. She had been drawn into its web, not just as a victim, but as a part of the very evil it harbored. The house had no power over her unless she let it. With newfound clarity, Emily walked toward the center of the room. She had to make a choice: stay trapped in this nightmarish cycle, or break free and finally put the house to rest. She took a deep breath and made her decision. Reaching out, she touched the dusty wallpaper, the very fabric of the house, and in that instant, the house trembled. A violent, deafening roar shook the ground beneath her, and she felt the walls closing in, the house fighting against her resolve. But Emily was stronger. The house's grip weakened as she focused all her energy on breaking the curse. She forced herself to release the fear, to let go of the power it had over her. The shadowy figures and her grandmother's haunting gaze faded away, and the room grew still. As the last traces of darkness vanished, Emily stood alone, the house's curse finally broken. But as the silence settled around her, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still watching, waiting, lingering just outside her reach. And then, in the distance, she heard it, the softest of whispers, barely audible, but unmistakably clear. "It's not over yet." The whisper echoed in Emily's ears, sending a shiver down her spine. "It's not over yet." She turned sharply, her heart racing, but there was nothing in the room. No shadow, no figure, just the overwhelming silence. The walls around her seemed to breathe, but she knew that this was a test, another illusion designed to pull her back into the house's darkness. As she stood there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, Emily realized something that had been lingering in her mind the entire time. She was no longer afraid. The fear that had once gripped her heart, the fear of losing herself, of being consumed by the house, was gone. It had taken everything it could, twisted her mind, and tried to break her. But it had failed. She stepped back from the center of the room, where the wallpaper had once been a symbol of the house's power over her. The room, though still old and abandoned, felt different now. It wasn't as if the house had been defeated completely, but something had shifted. Emily knew she had done what no one had been able to do for years. She had broken the curse. Or at least she had started the process. With one last look at the room, she turned and walked toward the door. It creaked as it opened, revealing the hallway beyond. The house was silent now, no longer alive with the whispers and shadows that had once haunted her steps. Emily stepped out into the corridor, taking one final deep breath before closing the door behind her. The house had lost its hold on her, but she knew that it would never truly let go. Some things weren't meant to be completely erased, only understood. And Emily had learned something vital in the process. The house hadn't been the true enemy. Fear had. Fear of the unknown, fear of what lurked in the shadows, fear of losing herself to a curse that had haunted her family for generations. But now Emily was stronger. She understood that facing those fears, accepting them and pushing past them was the only way to escape. As she made her way out of the house, she looked back one last time. The whispers were quiet now, distant echoes of a past that would never truly fade. Emily walked away, knowing that she had not only freed herself, but had also broken the chains that bound her family to this cursed house. The house was still there, standing as a monument to the dark past, but its grip on her was finally broken. She didn't know what the future held, but she now carried the courage to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. The house was behind her, and whatever whispers remained would fade with time, like memories that lost their hold with every passing day.